All right, welcome everybody to the WellTheory AIP food webinar. What we will be learning today is how to cook through the holidays while on the autoimmune protocol. So let's talk a little bit about AIP. But before we do that, I want to introduce myself for those of you who don't know who I am. I am Cristina Curp. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner at WellTheory, as well as a former restaurant chef and a cookbook author. And I really learned cooking AIP changed my life in so many different ways, and learning to cook AIP because healing diets are extraordinarily effective, but they can be taxing emotionally when you feel so restricted. And especially around the holidays, right? I know with Thanksgiving coming up, so many of us are thinking, well, what am I going to eat? And I want to enjoy the party and I want to enjoy the festivities, but I also want to feel my best. So it's kind of like hard and rock place, and we have to figure it out. So what we're going to go into is how to make sure that you can cook really good food throughout the holidays. So the autoimmune protocol, for those who don't know, I'll keep it short, is essentially a master elimination diet, really like known as the gold standard of elimination diets. It's actually been studied. There's been several like clinical studies with it, one for IBD, for Hashimoto's, and if I'm not mistaken, a third one will be published very soon for like I think psoriasis. And what has been found in these studies is that like really high rates of remission with autoimmune conditions through this elimination protocol, because what it does is that it omits inflammatory foods. It weighs the pros and cons of a lot of different foods. Let's say the pros of the nutrient density in these foods, and then the cons of the anti-nutrients or any kind of inflammatory compounds. So the foods that we omit in the autoimmune protocol aren't bad foods. There are no good and bad foods. There's just food and how it makes us feel. But in AIP, we omit these foods that could possibly have these compounds that are going to inflame the gut or exacerbate our autoimmune symptoms. And then we focus on foods that are anti-inflammatory and nutrient dense to heal the gut. So, but with that, we omit grains, dairy, nuts and seeds and seed-based spices, eggs, nightshades, legumes, coffee, like coffee, chocolate, alcohol, and lots of processed foods. So when we think about holiday cooking, you're like, well, how do I make any of the dishes I grew up eating and make them good so you can enjoy the holidays? And so we're going to talk about it because you can get really creative and have really phenomenal outcomes in the kitchen through the holidays and beyond. And what's wonderful is that although the point of the autoimmune protocol, as we teach our members in WellTheory, is that it's not forever. It's for a definitive amount of time, and then we add foods in one at a time in a very methodical process. And that way you find out which are your specific trigger foods and which foods are like totally awesome, safe foods. And through that process, you get to really have this wonderfully diverse diet, really like knowing for sure what foods work for you and what doesn't. And the beautiful thing is that as you add foods back in, you continue to heal. And the goal is always to have the most diverse and most the most variety in your diet possible. But for now, we are going to stick to AIP compliant foods. So meaning no gluten, no dairy, no nuts, no nightshades, no grains, no eggs, all the frees, as some of us in the community so, lovingly call it. So I'm going to share a little PowerPoint with you guys. We will be sending all of you the recording of this class, as well as an ebook with 5 AIP compliant holiday recipes. I'm going to talk a little bit about these recipes, using them as examples for substitutions and whatnot. And then we'll get into different types of ingredients. And then we can talk about, if you've done some reintroductions, how to take advantage of those. So let me share my screen 1 second. Interview. Okay, so welcome to the WellTheory Holiday Food Webinar. So I want to start with egg substitutions. And the reason I want to start with egg substitutions is because they're really one of the hardest things to substitute when you're on the autoimmune protocol. One of the most popular way to substitute eggs is through a gelatin egg. Now, the wonderful thing about this is that you have a recipe that you feel like fairly confident in modifying, like, okay, I can swap out the wheat flour for the cassava flour, but the egg is what stumps you. These substitutions should be able to work, and I've tested them a lot of times in recipes that use egg. If you can substitute like 1 to 2 eggs, is usually is ideal. So A gelatin egg is one of my favorites. And what I love about this is that using gelatin is, especially from grass-fed or pastured cows, you're getting that glutamine and a lot of these amino acids that are also going to have benefits to like gut healing, essentially. So the way that you make a gelatin egg is that you bloom gelatin. So you take 2 tablespoons of gelatin and you put it in like a little bowl with a tablespoon of room temperature water. And it's essentially going to like become this solid mass. Then you bring 3 tablespoons of water to a simmer or a boil, and when you pour it over it and whisk like your life depends on it, and it will become this like egg white consistency. And then you can mix that, like fold that into a cookie dough or a pie crust, and it will, as it cools, that it'll gel, so it'll expand, but it has the water in it, so it's going to have some flexibility. We'll go over. I will be kind of showing more runs, but if you guys look at the little icon, I will show you this later, but I like the Vital Proteins gelatin for this. And there is a difference with like the collagen and gelatin, and that's a common misconception. So gelatin, easy way to remember, gelatin gels, collagen is water soluble. So they're essentially they're the same protein, but collagen is further broken down so that it's water soluble. So the collagen's not going to give you that like viscosity that you're looking for. You want the gelatin. Margot says, I've seen some recipes that you use straight gelatin with no water. So yes, Margot, that does work in some recipes. I've done that in some of my recipes where I just mix gelatin into the dough. I feel like if you have a recipe where you're mixing the gelatin in with your flour, and then the flour has like the recipe has another sort of binder, maybe like a starch in there, and you're mixing a hot liquid into it. Like let's say a cookie dough where you would add like, or a cake, well, not about cake, but if you a cookie dough, let's say that, or a pie crust where you're going to add hot water to the mix, to the dry mix, that would kind of activate the gelatin. So I would say if you're going to if you're using it for a recipe that has whole eggs in it and you're replacing it with a gelatin egg, do that. If an AIP recipe as written just uses gelatin, then do that. Does that make sense? I hope that answered your question, Margot. Okay, so banana or applesauce. This is a very old vegan trick. So you can do, oh, sorry, let me go back. How do I go back? Nope. Sorry, I now have to go all the way around. Oh, hold on. Okay, it took too long. It's trying to rush me. Okay. So banana or applesauce. So these are great. 1 whole banana mashed up in something chewy. And I think that this is important. Remember, bananas and applesauce aren't going to give you rise. Like eggs often give rise, but bananas or applesauce won't. But if you're going to do like brownies, that'll work really well in that kind of thing. Or even kind of like a loaf type recipe, you can just do a mashed banana or apple. And this, it works really well for those who are AIP and kind of on the more plant forward side if you don't eat beef products like the gelatin. There is marine gelatin, but I don't think the flavor is on par. So a slurry, I wouldn't use it for baking per se, but if you are doing like a casserole, and I'll show you this in one of the next slides, like a stuffing recipe, which I'm going to talk about one tonight. Instead of using egg, we would use a slurry where you mix starch into some liquid, ideally bone broth or another kind of broth or water. And then that kind of dissolved starch, you mix that into another liquid, like into a recipe that has more liquid, and it'll thicken it right up. And it really creates it's kind of like a roux, but like a lazy version of a roux. So these 3 are the ways that you can thicken recipes and essentially create that binding thing. And a lot of like traditional Thanksgiving recipes, for example, in like the breading or like sweet potato casserole type situations, in the stuffing type recipes, and green bean casserole, I would say that, but green beans are not AIP compliant. But you could always use another type of vegetable like zucchini or carrot cut into matchsticks, and then do the rest of like a green bean casserole with like a cauliflower mushroom cream and thicken it with gelatin or a slurry, and bake it with the onions on top and some bacon or something like that to create a type of casserole that resembles something like a green bean casserole. So speaking of casseroles and whatnot, let's talk about stuffing. I think, and not just stuffing, but in general, replacing starches. So there is a way to go about things that's a little more like tit for tat, which would be, instead of a recipe that uses bread, you can bake an AIP bread. And that's totally fine and dandy. The reason that's not my favorite go-to is that, one, you have greater margin of error, because then you're essentially baking an AIP bread to then make an AIP stuffing. For me, I rather just use like a starchy vegetable and in place of the bread. It's probably going to feel a little bit better digestion wise, because when you think of like how many flours and stuff like that you're eating, even on a holiday, it could feel a little heavy. So this AIP plantain stuffing recipe, which you will get in the ebook we will email you early next week, is wonderful. It uses really, really green plantains, which are very starchy. They're an extremely versatile starch, an AIP, kind of like a MVP, if you would. You can also use yuca root, which is also very potato-like. And I would recommend a white sweet potato, also known as batata or Japanese sweet potato. And I would recommend this over the typical orange garnet sweet potato, because those they taste sweet. They kind of change the flavor profile. So again, if you're any kind of starchy thing, think about these different kind of root vegetables and starches. And a lot of the tropics, a lot of these things that grow like malanga, yuca, batata, plantains, they're all very tropical things. You might have a hard time finding them in certain places, but if your grocery store does not carry these, go to either an Asian or a Hispanic, like Latin food market, and they will have these. Like in any town, there is always like a small market that serves, different populations, and they will have more of these foods. And again, any kind of country that's around the equator, even if it's culturally different, will still uses the same kind of foods in different ways. AIP compliant bread. This is kind of a unicorn. Imagine you're using a bread that's grain-free, that doesn't use eggs. There are several good recipes online, and you can always do that, especially if you want like a roll or some kind of bread to serve with your food. So by all means, again, that's something that you can do. I just prefer to like keep things simpler. So let's talk a little bit about flours. Arrowroot and tiger nut flour work really great for that slurry I talked about to help bind, especially the arrowroot, the really starchy thing. Another thing to keep in mind is to really bring in like nostalgic flavors, right? So instead of focusing so much on that tit for tat, like just think about the flavor profiles that you want to bring in, like bacon or sausage, or, using sage and apples and garlic, using thyme, using cinnamon. And in the seasonings, instead of, because you can't use like seed-based spices, but really using the food to season, like a lot of fresh herbs, a lot of garlic, a lot, like cook your onions, and really focus on bringing in the components which are traditionally there, but just in new ways. So an AIP gravy is a really great example of that. Like, you don't really have to overthink it. Gravy is gravy. And a traditional gravy is made with like usually cornstarch. So essentially, instead of cornstarch, use arrowroot starch or tapioca starch, also known as flour, arrowroot or tapioca flour or cassava flour. And the secret to a really good gravy is really good bone broth. That collagen, that gelatin in there is what really makes it nice and silky. So as you see in the picture, that bone broth is like gelatinous. A good bone broth should be gelatinous when it's cold. And this is just as simple as melting your fat, putting in the flour, toasting it up like a nice roux. I'm using lard to keep it AIP. You could always use palm oil shortening if you don't like lard, or you could use, I wouldn't recommend coconut oil, the flavor would be off. So you definitely want to go with like bacon grease, lard, tallow, or palm oil shortening. And of course, the really good bone broth. I'm also using rosemary and some lemon, a little salt to flavor it. And again, this recipe will be in the ebook that you guys are getting. So mashed potatoes, right? Classic Thanksgiving recipe. And again, regular garnet sweet potatoes are going to be a little too sweet. I really like the batatas or Japanese sweet potato. These are red skin on the outside and white flesh on the inside, and they are much starchier. If you can't find these, there's an other sweet potato called the Okinawa sweet potato, which is a white skin with a purple flesh. It is also much starchier and less sweeter than the regular garnet or jewel sweet potatoes, which even though they're purple, you'd have a very colorful mashed potato dish, but it would work really well. In this recipe, what I do is I roast the whole garlic cloves, and I roast the whole garlic cloves. Oh man, I did it again. Every time I touch my mouse, it goes back to, hold on. It goes back. Okay. So when you roast the whole garlic cloves, and I use this in a lot of my recipes, if I'm steaming cauliflower or even steaming sweet potato, I will steam garlic cloves along with it. If I'm roasting potato, I roast the whole garlic clove along with it, because when garlic is cooked, it no longer has that bite, but it has that really nice savoriness, a little hint of sweet, and it really offsets. It'll like cut that sweetness of the potato completely out of there. And it's not going to be an overpowering garlic flavor, but it really brings a richness to the recipe. Other root vegetables to consider: yucca root. The edible yucca root is UCAY, not the two C's. The one with the two C's is like a plant, but we don't eat that one. Celeriac root is really good. It's the root of the celery. It kind of has a little bit of a celery flavor to it, but it's really nice. I mentioned the Okinawa sweet potato. That works really well too. So get creative. You don't have to just stick to sweet potato everything in the holidays. And don't forget to, don't sleep on your winter squash, like delicata squash, the acorn squash, the pumpkins, super good. And again, roasted garlic, bacon grease, duck fat. Duck fat is like an MVP of like flavor in the world. Okay, I haven't to admit someone else that might mess with my slide. Oh, it did. Okay. So duck fat is really, really good. Don't sleep on your fats for flavor. Like the fats that you use to cook can really, really not dictate, but can really swing the pendulum flavor wise. If you use olive oil, if you use coconut oil, if you use palm oil, if you use bacon grease. So if you're really thinking for depth of flavor, I'm a big fan of rendered animal fats. I do think that they add a lot of good layers. Like you don't want to do coconut oil on your mashed potatoes, because you're going to have like sweet potato with coconut oil is going to taste sweet and coconutty, and that's not the flavor profile you're looking for. Okay, any questions at this point? I've been going on for a while. Okay, I'll check the little box as it comes up, and I will also pause after this for questions. So Meg, could you please make sure you're muted on your side? That'd be amazing. Thank you. So this recipe, I know you guys are dying for this one, and I'm super excited to share it with you guys. They're mini pumpkin pies, and it's totally AIP compliant. Look at this super simple ingredient list. So talking about desserts, when it comes to AIP desserts, you really want to keep things kind of simple. This recipe uses agar-agar as the binder instead of gelatin, and that's an interesting replacement product because it is made with seaweed. So it does work for people who don't eat animal products, which is kind of cool. And this one, you don't bloom like gelatin, you just mix it right into the mix. But the reason I would recommend, if you're making an AIP pie per se, do mini pies, do mini apple pies or mini pumpkin pies, because AIP dough is going to be a little bit on the finicky side. And instead of rolling out a whole dough, if you do little like press in the pan like crust, it's going to be a lot easier. Plus it's really cute, really easy to portion, and you're going to have a higher success rate. Plus it's so much easier than, I'm telling you, like chilling with this, it's going to make your life easier, and it's going to work a lot better. The smaller the pie, the easier it is to get away with the dough. This dough is just literally made by mixing coconut oil, like cold coconut oil, or like you can use cold lard or cold palm oil shortening with a little bit of the agar and the flour. Or like someone asked at the beginning of the class, this would be a recipe where you could use the gelatin mixed right into the flour instead of blooming it. Again, I used agar for the original recipe, but the gelatin will also work. So you make a dough that sticks together, and then again, the filling is just that, very simple. It's pumpkin puree, it's vanilla extract, cinnamon, coconut sugar, and a little bit of the agar to bind it. What's interesting about like custards and filling when you don't eat eggs, you can use gelatin, you can use or you can use starches. Starches really tend to, if they heat up enough, like a tapioca starch, if it heats and then it cools, it will also thicken. So those are things to keep in mind when you're trying to get a certain type of custard consistency. There are other things that you could also rely on, just the density of your ingredients, like using a lot of like coconut, like making homemade roasted pumpkin instead of using the canned kind. And when you puree it, doing it like without any water, and like roasting the pumpkin instead of steaming it. So again, like trying to do as little liquid as possible and just going like really dense. You could even mix in some coconut butter. You can toast your coconut butter, which let me tell you, it's a game changer. If you melt your jar of coconut butter and you put it into a skillet over low heat and you just stir it until it turns like a nice tan brown, it's like it turns into some caramel coconut delicious magic thing, which is a wonderful condiment for sweets. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second and see if any of you guys have any questions. You can type them into the chat. I know we just went through a lot of information, but we've got 30 minutes left and I want to make sure we go through specific ingredients. Remember that all of these recipes, these 5 AIP recipes, you will be emailed them next week, or like Monday, you should have them in your email in an ebook all together, as well as the recording of this class. I know we went through a lot of things. I'm going to show you a little bit of some of the flours we talked about, because I know that, so Margot, yeah, so I actually looked it up. So it is one of those ingredients that's like, if you tolerate it, yes, it is AIP. It's like one of those things that it's made from 100% red algae, but because it's a relatively like new type food, what essentially was found is like, yeah, if it's something that you do well with, go for it on AIP. There's nothing in it that makes it non-compliant. I have some tiger nut flour here. I keep it here, you guys can see. And so what I love about tiger nut flour, and I want to talk a little bit about this MVP flour of mine, is tiger nut's kind of new to the scene. And it's not as readily available. I've never found it in a store. I always have to order it online. So I usually get it on Thrive Market. I did see that someone shared in the WellTheory community, Well Together, that Walmart has it for like super cheap on their website. Tiger nut flour is made from these little root vegetables that grow like kind of in the water, similar to like water chestnuts. And what I love about tiger nut flour is that it is like a mix between coconut flour and cassava flour. It is like 50-50 starch and fiber, because cassava flour made from yucca root performs really well. But if you have any sort of bowel intolerance to starches or a lot of sweets, or if maybe you're dealing with some major dysbiosis or gut stuff, it might be a little hard to digest. Some people do really well with it, some people don't. And tapioca flour is a derivative of cassava. So if you don't do well with cassava, you won't do well with tapioca. What about monk fruit sugar? So Kayla, monk fruit, unfortunately, like stevia, is not AIP compliant. I mean, if you're not AIP, that's totally fine. It is more of a low carb sweetener, but the only like allowed low carb sweetener are like the whole food, or what they call nutritive sweeteners, which are maple syrup, coconut sugar, and honey, and like molasses are allowed. What's my favorite brand of tiger nut flour? I really like Gemini brand, or the Anthony's Good brand are really good as well. My pleasure. So again, tiger nut flour, I've been using it more. I feel like it's a really good compromise, because coconut flour, as many of you know, if you've tried to bake with it, when you can't use eggs, coconut flour is very challenging because it's so absorbent. It's so absorbent. Hi, Olivia. I know it's okay. Don't worry. You're going to get the recording. So if you join late, you'll get the recording to start from the beginning, and everyone gets the ebook. Green banana flour is out of stock these days. Tell me about it. Look at this. I have a little bit of green banana flour left, and I'm like, so what's interesting about green banana flour is that I think it tastes really wonderful. I use it for one of my waffle recipes, but it caramelizes quite easily. So you have to be careful what you're making with it. The brand, I can't believe it's organic, right? The green bag, they tend to stock it. I found it at a grocery store here in the Virginia area called Mom's. You could try Thrive Market or Amazon as well, but I've never found green banana flour like at a Whole Foods or anything like that. But it is a good alternative. Although like I said, I think it caramelizes quickly. Michelle, date syrup. You're right. Date syrup, date sugar or syrup is also AIP. A little harder to find for sure. And whole dates. How can I forget? Whole dates. You can soak dates and blend them into your mix. Like let's say for the pumpkin pie, you can soak your dates overnight, take out the pits, the seeds, and blend it in the blender till it makes like your own date syrup. Let's do organic. That's what it's called. Oh, okay. So it's been out for Thrive Market too. So again, I didn't make any of the recipes that I'm sharing with you guys with green banana flour, because I tried to stay away from like the super hard to find ingredients. But you know, date syrup on Amazon, but I've seen it at Walmart. Walmart is really picking up, like stepping it up with the like paleo AIP stuff, which is awesome. There's also sweet potato flour. I've used this too. And it's honestly not as great as I thought it would be. I think it's okay. you know, I tend to like blend this, like this and green banana flour, I would blend with other things. Cassava flour is the one that's like 1 cup of like regular wheat flour, like all purpose flour, you would replace with a 3/4 cup of cassava flour. But again, if you don't do so well with starches, this one in a baked good and in the concentration that is baked like a baked good, it might be a little much. I also wanted to share with you guys this. So this is bacon grease. And coming up to Thanksgiving, every time you cook bacon, save your bacon grease because it's going to make cooking so much easier. So you know how people usually use a ton of butter when they prepare for Thanksgiving? On AIP, we hoard our bacon grease for Thanksgiving. So start saving now. I would cook your bacon grease in a nice clean cast iron or in your oven and drain it into little ramekins and store it in your fridge. This will be your flavor maker because everything that tastes like bacon tastes good. So there's that. Bacon rocks, sure does, Kayla. Walmart has coconut palm sugar so cheap. That's amazing, Meg. Thank you for sharing. I got my coconut sugar for your brine, I think, at Walmart too. I get the date syrup in the Middle Eastern markets in Rockville, Maryland. That's a really good one. Thank you for sharing. Yes, the AIP brine, it's really good too. You can make your own. That's one thing I wanted to mention. If you are not cooking your turkey and you are at someone's house and you are going to eat at someone's house and you are a guest and you are not in charge of the turkey, I would very lovingly ask them how they brine their turkey. A lot of store-bought brines have nightshades and additives and just a lot of ingredients which are not going to jive with you. So it is something that even if it was just marinated in, it can still impact you. So something that I did a few years when I was not making my own turkey is that I would prepare my own turkey breast or even like a nice little pork loin and bring my own like little protein entree for myself. Because again, I understand that you can't expect people to prepare their entire turkey to your needs, but no shame in your AIP game. You do what you have to do. And that's something that I talk a lot about with my clients at WellTheory, of like advocating for yourself, because the people who love you do not want you in pain and symptomatic. So do what you got to do. Mary Beth, I just checked Walmart and they have the Aya tiger nut flour 1 pound bags for $3.89. She's used it twice and it works fine for cookies and muffins. That's really amazing. So Walmart for the win with the AIP stuff. Okay, I'm going to get back to my slideshow because I want to go over some ingredients and we can talk about some of these, like what they look like, because I have some of the brands, although it seems like you guys are pros. Oh, one more recipe we can talk about. Hold on. So let me share my screen. Oop. Go to presenter view. Okay, so carob. I wanted to talk about carob for my chocolate lovers. Although I know Thanksgiving isn't so much the chocolate holiday, but Christmas sure is, and the December holidays, right? So carob powder is what we would use instead of cacao. It is essentially made from the pod of a legume that's like similar to cacao, but it's very good. This is also going to be in the ebook. It is a hot chocolate, quote unquote chocolate, because it's with carob, and it's really, really tasty. Again, uses grass-fed gelatin to thicken it a bit. Dairy-free milk of choice. If you don't like coconut milk or you're coconutted out, I highly recommend tiger nut milk, which to my knowledge isn't sold anywhere, but you can buy whole tiger nuts or use tiger nut flour to make your own tiger nut milk. And if Walmart is selling tiger nut flour at such a good price, that would be a really good alternative if you're not a fan of coconut milk, or the high saturated fat content of the canned coconut milk kind of gives you a hard time. Sometimes if you have a little bit of a hard time digesting fats, coconut milk can be a little uncomfortable on the digestive system. So those are some things to consider. You don't have to use coconut milk for everything. Again, tiger nut flour is a great alternative. So we talked a lot about gelatin. I wanted to show you kind of what the canisters look like. So actually what I love is that this shows you, so you see the red Great Lakes, that is their gelatin, and the green Great Lakes is their collagen. So what you want for an egg replacer is the gelatin, the red Great Lakes one. If you are doing vital proteins, you want the green canister, which is super confusing because of the Great Lakes, but in vital proteins, their collagen is in the blue canister. And of course, there's different brands. Perfect has a bovine gelatin and other, like, you know, there's a lot of different brands available right now. So the gelatin is from, pastured or like grass-fed cows is what you're looking for for that gelatin egg, and for a binder and a lot of things. And again, if you are not doing beef products or animal products, you can try the agar, which works really well. So talking about grain-free flours, we talked about a few. Tiger nut flour, obviously, is something that came up a lot. The Gemini brand, there's a lot of different ones online. The cassava flour, Otto's is a very popular brand, but Anthony's Goods makes it too, and Bob's Red Mill. Different coconut flours are really good, but we talked about coconut flour can be a little difficult if you're like for dusting things, or maybe a little bit of like coating can work really well. But if you are trying to make like a coconut flour bread, with AIP, there can be a lot of significant challenges there because coconut flour is just so absorbent. Arrowroot powder, I really like to highlight this because again, if you don't react well to cassava flour, you would probably you won't do well with tapioca either, and you could try arrowroot. They're kind of they're pretty much interchangeable. So in terms of AIP flours, these are like the power players, as we say. Someone, a lot of you mentioned green banana flour being a favorite, but also that it's sold out in a lot of places and unfortunately not that easy to find. So bone broth, for those who partake, is huge in terms of the quality of your sauces and your roux and your stews, because that protein, that collagen in that bone broth is really what's going to add that thickness, right? Like a good bone broth should already have a silky mouthfeel. I really like Bonafide Provisions. The founders actually an NTP, and they're AIP compliant, their flavors, which is great. There's another Broth is one which is recommended. I personally haven't had it, but I've heard good things. But always check your bone broth ingredients. A lot of like store-bought bone broth has tons of additives, tomatoes and peppers. I don't recommend shelf-stable bone broth. They tend to not be very good quality, except for bare bones, but I don't think their flavors are AIP compliant, unfortunately, not the ones that I have seen. And then I have a picture of soup bones here, not the prettiest thing ever, but very affordable. And you can make your own bone broth in your slow cooker. You just roast your bones with some garlic and some celery and some onions, some olive oil and salt. And then once they're roasted for like an hour at 350 and they're nice and toasty, you throw everything in your slow cooker, covered in water, splash of apple cider vinegar, and leave it on low for 24 to 48 hours, and you're going to have killer bone broth. So the store-bought stuff is great. There's a lot of amazing products out there nowadays. Thank goodness. Times are changing, but they're expensive. So honestly, soup bones in most places are super cheap, and you can make your own for like a fraction of the price. Flavor makers. So I wanted to go into, these are the things that you're going to lean on. The flavor profiles, to really make things fun. Like, don't sleep on your winter squashes. There's so many amazing varieties with different flavors. Some are like creamier, some are like fleshier, some are nuttier, some are sweeter. You can roast and stuff them and puree them and really just have a lot of fun with your different winter squashes. Bacon, we talked about bacon grease being amazing, and just adding bacon to things. It kind of adds that familiar flavor, and I don't know, it just makes everything taste so good, especially around the holidays when you can't do butter. Really leaning on those root vegetables that nowadays are, like you can really do some caramelized and nice and crispy roasted root beets, beets and carrots and turnips and radishes and rutabaga. All the root vegetables are fair game this time of year. You can do a medley with a lot of herbs and garlic. Roasted garlic cloves, again, flavor to the max, and you can add them to everything. You can make a garlic confit and essentially add these roasted garlic cloves to your sauces, to your soups. You can blend them to make like a mayo. Cinnamon in savory dishes is what's up. It is so good. I would recommend you try adding cinnamon to your turkey brine, or adding cinnamon to your stuffing, recipe. Adding cinnamon, garlic, and ginger is a really good way, and a little bit of turmeric is a really good way to get these warm spice flavors without the seed-based spices that are so popular this time of year. So remember, cinnamon, savory, garlic, ginger, salt, you're gonna have that really nice warmth kind of spicy like flavor you're looking for in a lot of the holiday recipes. Simple side dishes that can just be gorgeous, and you don't have to overthink it. Like, let's say, okay, you are making a turkey, or you're going somewhere where you know that you can eat the turkey, and you're going to bring stuff to share, but you're like, well, I don't know if a lot of people are going to eat what I bring, or maybe you don't mind, just like, you're not craving anything in particular. A plate of gorgeously roasted carrots with like garlic and some herbs is going to be a showstopper and so delicious. A shaved Brussels sprout salad, it's a classic, really easy to make an AIP version of that with a good apple cider vinaigrette and some like crispy bacon bits in there. Again, the roasted squashes I talked about, like even a delicata squash, you can cut these in half and seed them and roast them and stuff them with cauliflower rice with herbs and cranberries and all sorts of good stuff. So lean on those seasonal ingredients, right? That's really just going to make it festive. And the wonderful thing about seasonal produce is that it's actually more nutrient dense for you. This was actually, we shared some information in the Well Together group a while back, but they did a study on like broccoli, which is a winter vegetable, in the winter versus in the spring. And it was like 10 times or 10% more nutrient dense in the winter, which is crazy. So eating in season is like, there's a lot of benefits there. Pomegranate, not just are they gorgeous and make the best garnish, but really good for mocktails. If you put a few little pomegranate, I forget the word, there's a little word for the little seed things. Anyway, in a glass, and you put a little bit of sparkling water in there, or a little bit of kombucha, and you like muddy it with some citrus and some herbs, and maybe some basil or some mint, you have a really great mocktail, and you can, have something festive to drink for the holidays, since, on the autoimmune protocol, alcohol is not allowed. Now, I know a little birdie told me that some of you, especially those of you who are finishing the 6-week autoimmune, like the AIP, the group coaching and WellTheory, some of you are moving on to reintroductions, right? And so what's wonderful about that is that as you properly do your reintroductions, right, guided through the program, you can use this to your advantage. So if, let's say, your first reintroduction is egg yolks, you can then, it's a successful reintroduction, great, you can make a custard using egg yolks and coconut milk and cinnamon and vanilla or butternut squash or pumpkin. And you have this like wonderfully rich kind of new dish, seed-based spices that like, cumin or nutmeg, if there's a berry-based spice like black pepper. If any of these little reintroductions, don't be afraid to add those into your AIP recipe for a little oomph, for a little diversity. Same thing with the fats. If ghee or grass-fed butter are, introduced successfully, great, use those for your sweet potato mash. And then you're gonna have another layer of like nostalgia and familiarity with your flavor profiles. Okay, I'm gonna stop here for a second with the slideshow so that we can talk about a little more questions. Arrows, pomegranate arrows. Thank you, Kayla. You guys, I could not think of that word. So what time should we be at my house for Thanksgiving dinner? I don't know. My neighbors usually host, but I always do make a turkey because my neighbor and I have a very friendly competition with turkeys, and it's really fun because I win every year. And since we're moving, it's my last year. But I really do recommend that you advocate for yourself, especially around the holidays. I know it can be hard because, oh, look what I made. Can you try this? Try this, try this. Try a bite of this. Try this piece of the pie I made. And I understand that it can feel like you're being rude, or, you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. But remember that if you have autoimmune disease and you have trigger foods and you knowingly decide to partake in a trigger food, you could very possibly have some consequences that could last several days or more. I know for me, the way I navigate the holidays, and granted, I have done my autoimmune elimination and my reintroduction phase, and I've now been able to reintroduce a lot of foods. So I'm AIP plus several foods, but nightshades and dairy and gluten are foods that I never eat on purpose. So I'm okay verbalizing that, and I will make my turkey, and I will make my stuffing or my green bean casserole. Those are my two favorite dishes. And I will make my mini pumpkin pies, and I will take all that to the party. And so I can have some of it and I can share. And when someone says, can you try this? And I'll be like, it looks so good, but I'm not going to eat that because it can make me really sick. So it's okay to verbalize it, and you can find different ways to advocate for yourself. But remember that people who care about you don't want you to be in pain. And I know that it can be difficult because many people don't understand what it's like to live with chronic illness or autoimmune disease. But know that you're not alone, that there's a big community. I mean, look at all of us here. There's 33 of us here in this call, and 100 people who signed up for this webinar who are going to be watching this video later. And so think about how many of us are out here who are just trying to navigate the holidays while still feeling our best, right? And how beautiful is that to get to the end of the year where you've partaken and enjoyed your family and eaten delicious food and feel really good. So isn't that the goal? Okay. Do you guys have any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask, or you can feel free to use the chat box if there's any questions you want to ask me. If you're new to Zoom, you can find the chat box by hovering your mouse at the bottom of the screen. There's a little like talkie bubble that says chat, and you can ask there. Oh, let me. Okay. Awesome. Cool. So one thing I do recommend, and the wonderful thing about the autoimmune community is that we have so many amazing resources available. So feel free to use Google, social media, to look up recipes, test them ahead of time, go with things that, you know, have a lot of good reviews, ask friends that have maybe tried this, but don't be afraid to experiment and make something new. What are things you can make a day or two ahead? That's a really good question, Margot. So pies, for sure, especially the recipe we're going to send you of the mini pumpkin pies, you can make those ahead. I made those and had them in my fridge for a week and like ate one every day for like a week until they were gone, or more. And so the pies, like pies tend to do really well in the fridge, especially like AIP pies. Stuffing does pretty well actually, because you can just make it and then you can just keep it in like wrap it up, and then when you go to reheat it, just like put foil on it and to heat it through, but without burning the top. You could definitely, so if you do a turkey, is smoked turkey compliant? Annette, absolutely. So it's all about what you're putting on the turkey, right? So I tend to smoke my turkey. So I use an AIP brine, which is, it's a mix of citrus, cinnamon, herbs, garlic, ginger, salt, and coconut sugar. And I brine my turkey in this, and then I smoke it on my Traeger. I actually spatchcock it, which is when you like cut out the vertebrae and like open it. And then it cooks in like 4 hours. It's incredible. So the smoking itself doesn't make it not AIP compliant. It's that oftentimes smoked foods have like a dry rub or whatnot, which isn't compliant. I think I wouldn't recommend making the like mashed sweet potatoes ahead of time, because they get a little funky. They don't reheat that well. What else can you make ahead of time? I would definitely have like certain things ready to go. Like I would cook bacon ahead of time and save the bacon grease, but also have chopped bacon ready to go because it's easy to add to recipes. If you're going to use sausage for anything, you're going to have to make your own AIP compliant sausage. So you can buy ground turkey or ground pork and then buy your own seasonings, you know, like minced celery and garlic and onion and cinnamon and salt and ginger, and make your own AIP compliant turkey, turkey or pork sausage to use for certain recipes. If you are going to bake any kind of bread or rolls or things like that, I would test the recipe ahead of time, not the day of, and make it ahead of time if possible. Meg, do you make an AIP whipped cream with coconut milk fat or something else for pies? So I don't, because I feel like it doesn't like last that well, but you definitely can. So the way that you would make a coconut whipped cream is that you would buy the full fat cans of coconut cream. Trader Joe's, there's some brands that now sell, they say they're coconut cream only, and they tend to have a little bit more fat, but they still have the little water on the bottom. So I still refrigerate them. Like, don't just trust the brand, refrigerate them. So when you refrigerate the can of coconut milk or coconut cream, that like top part gets like solid. It's a white thick, and then the little water will stay on the bottom. So what you want to do is get 2 or 3 cans of that solid coconut milk fat, dump it into a cold bowl, and use a whisk that's also cold, and just whip it. And you can have a little drop, actually no vanilla because it's not going to be cooked. But you can do some coconut sugar, and if you want to sweeten it. But what I would do is make powdered coconut sugar. And the way that you would make powdered coconut sugar is get your coconut sugar and run it through your blender. especially if you have a Vitamix or Blendtec, that works even better. But you can powder your own maple or coconut sugar, and then you can sift it in there while you whip it, and it sweetens it a little bit. And then just keep it in the fridge until you're ready to serve, and then put a little dollop. It does melt kind of quick, so it depends. If like your house is hot, I wouldn't keep the pie garnished with the coconut whipped cream, because it will melt, if that makes sense. Yeah, but it is very tasty for sure. I know some places sell coconut whipped cream like in a can with but I don't know if it's AIP compliant, because I've never bought it, and it might be made with regular sugar or have some additives in it. But definitely, Meg, you can definitely do that for your pies. I would also recommend like doing a drizzle of the toasted coconut butter, or using toasted coconut flakes on top can be really yummy as well. Coconut really like transforms when you toast it. It's less coconutty and more nutty, if that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Lovely, lovely. Well, I'm excited. I think we're running out of time here. We're coming to an end, and I want to go over a few more things, but I'm really stoked for all of your holiday cooking and all the things that delicious things you're going to make. Dried cranberries. Do AIP ones exist without paying $30 a pound? I don't know, Mary Beth. I don't know. I unfortunately, oftentimes I have a very hard time finding unsweetened cranberries. Usually like Whole Foods or like Thrive Market would have something like that. Fortunately, you often don't need even a whole pound of dried cranberries. Yeah, but I don't know. It's just one of those things that they're kind of expensive. Yeah. Dried fruit is one of those things to definitely tread carefully. And on AIP, it's something to not be like, definitely you want to have something that doesn't have any added sweetener, and you want to just, again, tread carefully, because sometimes dried fruit, not all dried fruit is compliant. Like I know dates are, but I know not everything is. And again, just tread carefully with that. Check Azure Standard Co-op. Oh, that's a really good idea. I totally forgot about them. I used to buy stuff when I first went AIP. They do have a lot of good stuff. So Azure Standard Co-op. It's in the chat. Thank you, Michelle, for recommending that. Wonderful. There's like some websites like nuts.com, which also sells more than just nuts, but that they're a good place to check out too for some bulk items. Any kind of co-op is going to have a good price. You know, unfortunately, there is this kind of like trade-off, right? And most of the time you can definitely get through AIP really budgeting food. You know, you're sticking to plants and animals, as I call it, right? You can stick to ground beef and cabbage and broccoli and, you know, very simple things, and it can be very cost effective. When you get into the holiday baking, when you get into the flours and the specialty ingredients, it's definitely going to be a little more pricier. And that's why I say, like, choose your things, go simple. You don't have to make not every single recipe you make has to be a swap, right? So for example, go with a simple side of roasted root vegetables or carrots, and then make, you know, the little pumpkin pies, or make this, you know, the plantain stuffing that uses whole foods and not a lot of flours, very little, you know, and make a dessert. But I wouldn't necessarily be like, well, bake a bread for stuffing to then make this, you know, because you're going to end up spending a fortune on all these grain-free flours. Kind of pick and choose what you're going to use these specialty ingredients on, so they go a little bit farther. The benefit of things like the gelatin is that, although, I mean, the price on these has gotten a lot better, but 1 or 2 tablespoons of this goes a really long way. So this will last you a long time, even if you buy it for some ingredients, just a few recipes. So again, keep it simple, you know, don't overdo it. Understand, like, know that there's so many delicious flavors. Again, like roasting root vegetables with cinnamon and bacon grease, bacon fat, and garlic and salt till they're like really, really crispy. Mm-hmm. You know, like little things like that. You're gonna do so good. You're really gonna enjoy the food you're eating. You think, oh my God, Meg, you're cracking me up. Meg says she saves all her money because she's not drinking alcohol, so she can splurge on the food, right? That's a really good way to think about it too. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some things you're not spending money on, so that's true. Okay, so I want to finish out by, let me share my screen again. So again, keeping it simple, enjoying the whole food dishes, and you guys are going to do great. And I wanted to Oh, there you go. So we have a beautiful website. WellTheory's beautiful website has launched. You can find us at welltheory.com. If you are one of our beautiful members, we love you and we're so proud to be able to work with you. And if you're not part of WellTheory and you want to check us out, what we do is we offer autoimmune care. Nutritional, we have a team of nutritional therapy practitioners which work on a group setting and one-on-one setting with our members to guide them through either an autoimmune protocol or different kinds of healing modalities. And we really focus on a multifaceted approach. It's not just diet, but like lifestyle and emotional and all the kind of support. And the wonderful thing about our practitioners like myself is that most of us, or all of us at least, have been touched by autoimmune disease one way or another, personally or by family members. And so we really understand and we've been there, and we're really an awesome little family. So check out the website, and you can always find us on Instagram if you have any questions that you want to send us or send a comment, or you can reach out to any one of our awesome team members. Yeah, so any last questions before we're out of here? This has been really fun, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more awesome resources with you. And remember, you are all getting an ebook with the 5 AIP recipes we talked about, and you are all getting the recording of this class as well emailed to you next week, so you can revisit if there's any information you want to know. But again, I hope you love the recipes. The ones that we talked about today, I made them. I developed those myself, and I'm really excited to share with you guys. Oh, it's been my pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you guys so much. Again, anytime that you feel stuck or alone on this journey, know that you are not, that the autoimmune family we're out here, we're on the internet, there's resources, and you're not the only one, even if you feel like that in your everyday life. It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure. Yeah, keep your eyes open thank you so much, Annette. I can't wait to talk with you soon. Yes, I'm so glad. I'm so glad this is having you excited for the holidays. Olivia, I do not know. The thing about the ebook, I will see. The team is on it. The team is on it. It might come sooner than Monday. I will, but I don't have control over that directly, but I will let them know that it is highly anticipated. We did share the AIP pumpkin pie recipe is on the Instagram feed at Join WellTheory. If you want to make the pumpkin pies, that recipe was shared in full on the Instagram feed at Join WellTheory. So if that's the one you're eyeballing, you can find it there. You don't have to wait till Monday. Oh, you're definitely not alone. Believe me, we are strong. We are plenty, the AIP community. And again, verbalize with your loved ones, verbalize with your community and your family, your needs and what you're doing. And that way it helps you feel less alone too. You'd be surprised, you don't have to just say, I can't eat that. I choose not to eat that. It helps manage my autoimmune disease, so I don't have symptoms, and people are going to be really responsive. And, listen to your language. It's not that you can't eat anything. It's that you're choosing not to because you choose to feel better. So remember that as we go into the holidays. This is a choice you're making because you're in control. I always tell my clients, you're grown. No one's here making you do anything. You're making these choices. Oh, mahalo. Thank you so much, Kira. I'll be over there in Hawaii with you soon in January. All right, everybody. Again, thank you so much. Eyes peeled for your inbox from an email from WellTheory that will have the recording and the ebook. And remember, you can always contact us through our social media at Join WellTheory or through our website, welltheory.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. Have a lovely evening and a wonderful holiday. Take care.